Hey all, it's Ryder, and I hope you're staying cool, calm, and collected. I've had a lot of comments ask what I run, and truthfully, my setup changes every hour as I constantly test new combinations, but I thought I would present to you what I think to be a meta setup and using all of the tools that I've covered throughout the series. One of my favorite parts about this build is that it can be used on any class to achieve almost the same effectiveness no matter what. Before I go further though, I want to be clear about the build's strengths and weaknesses. The build has an incredibly strong burst, allowing you to turn and kill opponents off with a really simple combination. I'm also factoring the time it takes to build a combo, as because our ultimate is cheap, we're able to do high amounts of damage with minimal time between burst windows. Our sustain is fairly strong and certainly above average without much investment into this, solely because our build can put aggressors on the back bar constantly. We're not needing to go back and forth often with this build, but instead continue to assert pressure, thus lowering our resource drain due to the cost difference between offensive and defensive abilities. During times of great pressure, however, being caught out can drain resources quickly, so if you're finding issues sustaining, you can easily swap out some glyphs or other choices within the build. The mitigations we're using in this build are pretty high for the most part, definitely above average, but especially so when we factor in the amount of block cost mitigation we have, due to the several sources of unique resource return, meaning our stamina will continue to regenerate when we block. This grants us longer periods of time that don't require us to immediately break line of sight in outnumbered scenarios. So if this appeals to you, definitely keep watching. To cover the last part of our strengths and weaknesses, we're going to be looking at the speed. So it's okay on most builds. I mean, we have Major Expedition incorporated, but if you're using Storm Calling, you can also use Streak, which is the best mobility skill in the game. So the graph will change dependent on if you're using Streak, Vault, or any other mobility skill, and is entirely dependent on your playstyle as well. One of the things I really like about this is it can be super versatile to adjust however you want to play. So if you'd rather be more tanky, you can pick up Soldier of Apocrypha, for example, or Winter's Embrace, but if you wanted to be more mobile, you can pick up Storm Calling, for example. So to get into the abilities, let's go ahead and go over our class lineup. So I wanted to really lean into the critical damage path as much as I could before I started hitting opportunity costs from diminishing returns. I went with Animal Companions and Assassination for my two damage skill lines, and I went with Restoring Light for my defensive line. For this setup, I actually recommend Storm Calling for the increased physical damage and amplitude passives, but I personally lock myself only on my Templar. If there's a specific character you would like to play, you absolutely can use that base class's defensive line, and this will work mostly good. Animal Companions and Assassination both provide high amounts of critical damage, with Assassination also providing some crit chance. When the Hemorrhage passive activates, I'm sitting around 50% crit chance and 54% crit damage when I'm in combat. While I could go further into this path of damage like I covered in one of my previous theory crafting videos, I could go for a Precise Battle Axe for more critical chance and damage, but I actually did some calculations and I actually started hitting the soft cap of critical chance for this build, and investing further into this path wouldn't yield as much as another path like Penetration. The front bar abilities are pretty simple, with a spammable, 3 burst skills, and Deceptive Predator to get away, and for the passive critical damage. Our ultimate is in cap, of course, and this is pretty much a non-negotiable for the setup. Onslaught would be a more viable option if we didn't already have a lot of natural penetration, so it quickly loses value. Our back bar resembles a standard Templar, but with Bold Edge, so I won't go too much into detail with this. Like I said, I actually do prefer Storm Calling more for this, but other choices work as well if you'd rather play on a specific character. As long as you have Major Resolve, a Burst Heal, Vigor, and 2 other defensive skills, they will work okay. We're using Temporal Guard for minor protection, but if you are using a Sword and Shield, use Spell Wall. So for the sets, we're using Perfected Null Arca front bar, but it doesn't have to be perfected, normal works just fine. Rallying Cry back bar, the Bloodspawn monster set, and the Monomyth Mythic. Null Arca is exceptionally strong right now and adds burst to our combo that we'll get to later, but it's just like how Kalurian's was back when that set was released. I chose the set for a few reasons, starting with the critical chance. As I said, we are a critical damage build, so the 2 lines of critical chance align perfectly with our goals, and it matters more than people might assume. The damage activation from this is, in my opinion, overtuned, and simply hitting targets way too hard, and has damage a little lower than an in cap, and a little higher than a surprise attack. It doesn't sound like a lot, but there's a lot of power in how this setup secures kills. Moreover, the set requires critical strikes to activate, and our spammable activates Sundered, giving another proc chance, and our light attacks give Diseased, adding on to this. Basically, you're going to get your maximum stacks really quickly, and this could be accelerated if your modification to this build includes a dot, like on the contingency script, but this might make the ideal activation inconsistent. Our back bar is Rallying Cry. There's really not a lot to say about this, it's just the staple back bar defensive that also provides weapon and spell damage. I have an entire video about this set, so I'm not going to go into detail now. If you don't want to run this, or are planning to run a group with somebody already having this set, there's plenty of alternatives that can be one barred, but I'm going to leave that to your discretion. Bloodspawn can absolutely be swapped out for Balorg, but let's go back to the idea that one set is used to increase the frequency of ultimates, that being Bloodspawn, and the other increases potency, that being Balorg, as mentioned in my gear video. On this build specifically, I prefer running Bloodspawn as my combination doesn't take much time at all to build up, and is even quicker with this. But in Imperial City, where ultimate is built really quickly, or in duels against strong players, I do swap to Balorg. Carry both with you and change it depending on how you want it. The added resistances from Bloodspawn are pretty good too, but not life or death to drop or include in the build. Balorg is definitely stronger if you want tighter burst windows, and in fact, better players often go for tighter but more potent burst windows. Picking the right monster set is often defined by your playstyle, and this slot can be adjusted up to your preference. For example, I think Zol would be a really good alternative if you like that as well. Like Rallying Cry, I'm not going to go too much about the Monomyth. We're a critical damage build, and there's a lot of build videos already talking about how strong the Monomyth is, and the details are on your screen. Basically, this is just an obvious choice for us, as we are a critical damage build, and the extra 20% critical damage with the additional bonus of major protection on the back bar kind of makes this a no-brainer. I will note that because of the minor timidity, I am using Bloodspawn paired with a decisive sword when I'm using Sword and Shield, but right now I'm using Defending Ice Staff, but we'll get into that later. To top off the build for gearing, we have one free slot, so of course we use Reinforced Trainee. While Impen is regarded as the strongest trait in the meta, I'm running Reinforced to try to min-max my armor slots, as heavy armor benefits a lot from the Reinforced trait. This also provides versatility against off-meta setups that either rely on raw damage or dots. Moving on to traits, as I said in the set section, I run a Sharpened Maul because I'm starting to hit diminishing returns on critical chance. For the back bar, I wanted more defensives, so I ran Defending trait. This pairs naturally with the Ice Staff's passives as seen in the Destruction Staff tree. I'm running 2 times Heavy Bloodspawn with Reinforced, with the rest of my body pieces being impenetrable. I do this because I want to maximize my armor value, and the Reinforced trait does this the best. At the beginning of the patch, we saw a lot more players running critical damage builds, but we're seeing an off-meta develop into raw damage, so I wanted a bit of versatility with my setup, hence the Reinforced. Because the other pieces are medium and light, they would not benefit nearly as much from Reinforced, and because Impenetrable is a static value, makes the most sense for these pieces. All my glyphs are prismatic, but if you're tight on cash, put health glyphs on the big pieces, and similar glyphs on the smaller pieces. I run 2 protective jewelry and 1 bloodthirsty. I'm not entirely sold on any one trait, so don't take this as a Bible to swear by. And honestly, many of the traits can be swapped out for depending on playstyle. If you prefer Swift, run that. But if you want stronger burst, Infused is really strong. It's really just about what you want from the build, so definitely make sure to adapt this rather than just using it as a copy-paste. Now, moving on to the Mundus food and CP, the difference between Thief, Shadow, and Lover on this build aren't really a big difference, and I've tested this in the build editor many times. But at the end of the day, Lover beats out the other 2 by just a bit, so I am going to be using that. Thief, like Precise, gives more healing, and Shadow has less average damage than Thief, but it gives higher bursts that aren't as reliable. It's like my choice for Bloodspawn, I just prefer the consistency of Lover, and in this case, it's ideal for committing high pressure to a target. If you wanted to run more defensive, you could swap this out for Thief, but I would not recommend the Lady. If we pull too much back from our offense and try to go defensive, getting kills is going to be harder, and that means we're playing on our back bar more. With this in mind, our build is not meant to be camping the back bar. It totally can for small periods of time, but our build is better the more we're aggressive. So to make our build universally stronger, we add damage through the Lover Mundus. For food, you can go for a tri-stat food that adds to all your sustains, or you can go for a health food with recoveries, or whatever you really want. This is really versatile for this build. I personally run Jewels of Misrule for the stat recoveries and maximum hit points. On that note, I run a lot of points into health, and this kind of changes depending on how I'm feeling that day. So sometimes I'll split it between health and stamina, or all health and a little bit of stamina. It's whatever you really want out of it. The more comfortable you are on the build, the more points you can put into stamina. But if you're newer to PvP, maybe start with a higher health pool. For blue champion points, I mostly go offensive with my CP, so you can use things like Fighting Finesse, Master at Arms, Duelist Rebuff, and Ironclad. But if you're not as comfortable, you can try Focus Mending or any other defensive CP. Damage is honestly so high right now that you can absolutely use more defensive points if you prefer. Exploiter is a strong alternative to one of your offensive options, as we can easily proc off balance. Personally, I target swap often when I'm in open world, and I'd rather have faster damage with Master Arms than Exploiter, but again, this is up to you. For champion points, Sustained by Suffering, Pain's Refuge, Survival Instincts, and either Fortified or Celerity, depending on what I'm doing, are what I usually run. Another part I really like about this build is how simple the combo is. Spam Surprise Attack a few times to decrease their health into a more ideal burst range. If the opponent is continuing to block, or otherwise sit on their back bar to prevent a huge portion of your burst, do not go further into the rotation, and just keep spamming until they swap. If, however, they begin to try to go offensive, we move into the next step. Step 2 is to activate Shulks, as this applies Major Breach and is a delayed damage skill. After that, Contingency to add on to our delayed damage, and ending the burst combo with Incapacitating Strike with 120 ultimate or more. In most scenarios, this will nearly kill your enemies, and even more so in non-CP environments like Battlegrounds. While you can in-cap without 120 ultimate, I don't recommend doing this as you're going to want a stronger burst window. I should also note that Shulks hits harder on the second activation, so against some stronger players, you're going to want to time this off of the second Shulks rather than the first one. But from my experience, the first Shulk activation is usually enough to kill. If the target is still alive, this is when you throw your Merciless Resolve. If your opponent anticipates this, wait a moment for them to dodge, then throw it out. During your burst, Null Arca will activate, sending out another large chunk of damage. That's basically it for the offensive rotation. It's pretty simple. Shulks, Contingency, Incap, Bow proc. And if they're alive, you set up the combo again. That's one of the beauties of the rotation, is it's very simple and very fast to pull off. For defensives, prioritize keeping up Netch and Focus Rune. If you're taking a lot of damage, our build has a lot of unique resource return, meaning we can restore stamina even when we're blocking. I wanted to use this to my advantage as much as possible and invest more into this playstyle rather than kiting, as we're also benefiting from standing within both our rune and ritual circles. Anytime you're defensive on the setup, block or roll dodge to break line of sight first. But against a single opponent, you honestly can't die to them as long as you block and activate your heals. The sustain on this setup is really strong, and you can basically just sit in your runes and block while you recover. That's really it for the build, and the rest of the video is just going to be a montage kind of showing you how to play it. If you enjoyed, please let me know and make sure to subscribe to the channel. Best of luck in subclassing, and if you have any questions, please ask in the comments. I want to try to help as many people as I can, but ultimately, and most importantly, remember to be cool, calm, and collected. I'll see you guys in the next one.